Very interesting. Roger Barker, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts this evening. Good to get you on the programme. Thank you. Now, the messaging app WhatsApp has been severely restricted in Iran tonight as the authorities try to contain some quite extraordinary protests that have spread around the country. The anger surrounds the death of a 22-year-old woman who was arrested in Tehran by the morality police for not observing the strict Islamic dress code. Mahsa Amini was allegedly beaten in custody and later transferred to hospital in a coma. This is the northern city of Sari, where protesters were cheering several women who'd thrown their headscarves into a fire. In the southeastern city of Kerman, another woman cut off her hair in an act of protest. And in the city of Mashhad, this is police hitting women with clubs. President Ibrahim Raisi has promised an investigation, and he was at the UN General Assembly today in New York, where he was speaking. And he did refer to this, but he condemned the West's double standards.
The Islamic Republic of Iran rejects some of the double standards of some governments vis-à-vis human rights and sees that as the most important factor which has rendered banal the topic of human rights in the eyes of many, because this is something that is currently taking place, a discourse that is taking place in the Islamic Republic of Iran, where we started speaking of and creating a dialogue about the death of tens of innocent women in a Western country. So until we have these double standards where attention is solely focused on one side and not all equally, we will not have true justice and fairness. Human rights belongs to all.
Persian service reporter Bahman Kalbasi joins me from New York. Mr. Raisi, very keen to put the blame elsewhere, but within the country, Bahman, it seems that people have formed their own mind as to who is responsible for this and where it comes from.
Yes, I think the majorities of the protesters' response is very clear. They do not believe that this was an accident, and they do not believe that she had a disease that resulted in some sort of a collapse of natural causes, and the excuses that Mr. Raisi is offering, or the promise of an investigation, is falling on deaf ears because millions of Iranians have watched over and over that these investigations go nowhere and people responsible are never held to account. So what we're seeing is a juxtaposition of a president coming here at the United Nations talking about human rights and justice, while the forces of his government are shooting at protesters, are arresting them en masse, caging women in police vans, and arresting even young children in some cases. We've had images of under 18-year-olds being shot in smaller cities. In Tehran, there's been a lot of tear gas in the last few hours to try to disperse the crowd. Those in the streets are risking their lives because they do not believe that these behaviors will stop unless they react to it, and they do not believe that this government will investigate itself. So him standing here was very much resonating in a negative way for millions of Iranians on how tone deaf this government can be, because the reality on the ground is they continue to beat people. They continue to deploy maximum violence, and therefore their claim that this was not a case of Mahsa Amini being beat is very hard to believe.
From time to time we see flare-ups like this in Iran. How would you characterize where we are tonight? I mean, is it just a street protest? Could it be something more? Are we at a tipping point? How would you describe it?
It's very hard to predict where it will go, but it is very clear that it's in its characteristics is different in some very significant ways. One is women are leading it. Not that in previous protests women didn't have a role, they sure did. But they are now leading the protests, and they're crossing lines, red lines that the regime has been meticulously building for 40 years. You could do a lot of things, but do not take the headscarf off. Do not challenge this sort of bold, fundamental rule that women need to cover themselves up, cover their hair up. So that has been thrown out the window by all these protesters who are bravely doing what they're doing night after night. And now the electronic curtain's coming down because clearly the regime feels that it is not able to control this and needs to stop all communication between the protesters and between the world outside and inside. So that itself is a sign that they don't want these images to be broadcasted to other cities in Iran and for protesters to feel that they can continue and carry on. But nevertheless, if it stops, at whatever cost it stops, no matter how much violence they deploy, the fact is the hijab, the forced hijab in Iran is now fundamentally challenged in ways that has never happened in the last 4 decades.
Well, that's really interesting in and of itself.